Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to very especially thank the Honourable Member for Toronto Danforth for sharing her time with me and for her kind words. Tonight's Take Note debate has been mentioned several times as being historic. I have to say I was surprised to find this is the first time in the history of this Parliament, in the history of this place, that we've had a Take Note debate on the issue of women murdered by their intimate partners. That violence against women is so prevalent in our society, it strikes me as a strange thing that this is the first time that a Parliament has taken up the debate. But I also want to say that I'm impressed with the speeches, impressed with the sharing, and with the non-partisan commitment. And I regret the extent to which partisan crept in from now and then, but I think it's important to recognize that we're all in this together. We recognize that we're in a society which is, whether we want to face it or not, it's a patriarchy, which is to its bones sexist. We also live in a society where we have to acknowledge systemic racism. We have to acknowledge that a lot of work needs to be done. You know, we talked, and of course it's what prompted tonight's very important Take Note debate, the tragic killing of 7 women, so very, very close together in time in Quebec. But we recognize as well that over the course of this pandemic, 160 femicides have taken place. 160 women have lost their lives, and to intimate partner violence. Now, many of the references have been to areas of urban centers, and there couldn't be a place in this country more idyllic than Saanich Gulf Islands, where I am so honored to represent the community here. We had, on one of the most idyllic places within my idyllic riding, a case of a woman murdered by her husband in June of 2020. Want to say her name, Jennifer Quinnell. She had 3 little boys. She left her husband of 18 years because she was unsafe, and only went back to the home because she was certain he wasn't going to be there. He was there. He murdered her, and then he took his own life. It left the community reeling, but it happens far too often. And there's lots of good evidence, and there are lots of good studies that men in some situations are jealous, do not want their wives to find happiness. And Jennifer Quinnell's family gave a statement to the media to say that he had killed her because if he couldn't be happy, he didn't want her even to live. Margaret Atwood is credited with something as a quote, but actually was a longer commentary in which she said, "Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them." This is how we live our lives. I was taken by the fact that global reporter Mercedes Stevenson wrote a long thread on Twitter within the last number of days about what it's like in the normal course of our days as women to navigate dark places, to get from where we parked the car to where we're moving through a dark place. And she describes step by step what she does unconsciously of looking around. Am I in a safe place? Other women have mentioned it tonight. Is the area lit? Clutching your keys in your hand in case you need to lash out to protect yourself. And what I found striking wasn't her relating to everyone what you do day to day as a woman to navigate safely in spaces that are public. And tonight we recognize the most dangerous spaces are the private ones. What I found astonishing was how many of her male colleagues posted comments to say how shocked they were. This is how you live your life? Yes, this is how we live our lives. So we should do things differently. Let's celebrate those movements and those men who want to make a difference, like Paul Lacerte, his daughter Raven, and the Moosehide movement, to say, let's end violence against women and children by having men step up and say what's acceptable and what's not. Let's fight patriarchy by saying we are equals at all times from our birth, baby boys and baby girls, and let's make sure that as babies, they get a fair chance, that they're not subjected to trauma themselves. This is a societal project. C'est un projet de société, and it's right. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Next.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I couldn't find my little mute thing there. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the member. Her words move me very much, as have many of the women who've spoken tonight, and some of the men as well. And you are right, it is a societal problem, and from day one, children need to be taught that we are equal, that one is not more important or valuable or loved than the other. But it is a societal problem, and it's a serious one. And if we look at what's going on in England right now, what does the member think about the idea of making it a hate crime, misogyny a hate crime?
Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you to the member for Cumberland Colchester. And I want to also thank her publicly for her bill that we carried in the House a few days ago to second reading to deal with environmental racism and how it's affected the lives of Black Canadians and Indigenous peoples in this country.
Thank you for seconding
absolutely.
It.
Oh, well, that's an honor. It is clearly a hate crime. We don't acknowledge that these are hate crimes when that incel apparent movement, right? When we had the killing, I won't say the name of the killer, but he's just been found guilty of people murdered on the streets of Toronto. What was his incentive? He hated women. This is not something that is rare in our society. It's all too common, and it should be recognized as such.
And comments, the honourable member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First off, through you, I want to thank all the participants in tonight's debate. I don't know or have all the answers on how we can completely eradicate violence against women, but I do know education and shining a light on the fact that women are being held hostage by their partners is one small step in doing that. Make no mistake, these women don't choose this abuse. They are hostages. I'm hoping tonight's debate will help more people become more aware of this horrific situation. Finally, for all those women watching out there, know that there is help out there. Resources like in my own riding Women's House serving Grey Bruce. I fully acknowledge more resources are needed. Does the honourable colleague agree?
Member for Saanich, Gulf Islands.
I want to acknowledge that the honourable member holds the seat of Bruce Grey, Owen Sound, once held by the first woman elected member of parliament in this place, Agnes MacPhail, in 1929. And I'm sure he speaks with her spirit. And yes, we need more resources. Yes, even though the government has increased resources to women's shelters, the fundraising that usually happens through such volunteer organizations has not been possible through COVID. So they're still terribly short of resources. We need to do more.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments, the honourable member for Shefford. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to thank my colleague from Saanich, Gulf Island, for their testimony and involvement in the feminist cause, which we share together, the Association of Feminist Parliamentarians, a cause that we share, and the environment as well. That being said, for some time, I've been attending and listening to certain conferences of the UN. An event was supposed to be held in New York in March last year, but because of the pandemic, it was done virtually 25 years after Beijing. What came out of this conference was ties between threats that women still face and risks to them as a barrier and obstacle to going into politics. On average, we're talking about a maximum of 25 or 30% of parliamentarians, from what I hear, as a general statistic. And there are some countries where there are not at all enough women in leadership in government and elected officials. So I'd like to hear you on these barriers to and risks of violence.
Violence has 1 minute to respond.
I will be brief. Perhaps we'll have another opportunity to deal with that question, but I would say yes. It's an honor to speak with my colleague of Shefford on the issues of feminism throughout the entire world and the UN. This is a question for women of the world, not only in Canada, and we must do more than now.